Welcome to The Current by TreasureCoast.com, where we discuss interesting people, places, and happenings on Florida's Treasure Coast.
Well, Mr. Williams, I appreciate you being on. Why don't we start by you just giving an introduction to who you are?
So Bobby Williams, Florida governor, obviously a candidate. Born and raised, third generation. Born in Polk County, Winter Haven, Florida. Actually, come from a very poverty family. My mother was 14 when she had my brother, 17 when she had me. Ended up marrying my dad, but we come from nothing and just kind of started a company at 25. We got very successful at it, but I was never raised in church. At 32, had a radical encounter with Jesus, changed my life. Started going to church next 4 to 5 years and learned what not to do. So 2016, I started a ministry called the Freedom Tour Food Disaster Relief. During COVID, we didn't mask, didn't shut down, didn't do none of that, and just started feeding like 1,500 people a day. And since then to now, we do hurricanes. We average about 1 million pounds a month. We put over 100 million pounds of product. If you had to buy 350 million gift in kind into the state of Florida for free, just working with sheriff's departments, EOCs, just nonprofits, United Ways, churches, different people to make Florida better.
I appreciate that story. And, third generation Floridian, I'm sure Florida's changed a lot from the stories you've heard and just from the time that, since you grew up, since you started a business. What was it that originally prompted you to run for governor?
God. God told me 3 years ago to run for governor. I didn't understand it because I love what I do. I mean, I run a ministry in a church here in Eloise, Florida, which used to be one of the worst crime rates in Polk County. And almost today we have zero crime rate. And I see lives change in the thousands. So why do I want to get involved in corrupt politics? But after I started running, and I realize it now, because too long we voted against the least of two evils. We don't have good, godly men or women running for these seats. So how much evil is too much evil?
I think it might be worth touching on. I know that you had you had been a part of Freedom Tour, and I know that kind of to your point, not having a background in politics, it seems in a lot of situations, to some people that's a benefit because, to some degree at a state and certainly like a federal level, sometimes people maybe see a refresher. So I guess the question would be, from your eyes, what gives you the capabilities, the confidence to run a state like Florida, maybe as a business owner or as your experience maybe in church, and Freedom Tour, what has that experience taught you?
Yeah. Well, 25 years business owner, still own it. I've worked with presidents of colleges. I work with schools, teachers, principals, just because we do a lot of network cabling, big business guys, network cabling, that kind of stuff, infrastructure. But the biggest one is Freedom Tour. So during Freedom Tour, like during COVID and hurricanes, especially COVID working over 500 different agencies, government, sheriffs, jails, prisons, city commissioners, county commissioners, mayors, EOCs, all this stuff. And one of the worst times ever, you know what I'm saying? You think COVID, people didn't know what to do. They were freaking out. And we were actually not only feeding people, but we were logistically sending stuff all across the state to prisons, jails, sheriffs, communities. So I know that, the difference in me and what I did was I got rid of the red tape. The problem with government is you got too much red tape. You can't get nothing done, too many barriers. And I was able to do that from COVID and hurricanes. So with hurricanes, the same way. I mean, we're shipping stuff. I'm working with the National Guard. I'm actually on the EOC here at our county. When like 2024, when Hurricane Milton come through, we moved 10.5 million pounds in our county for free. County never had to touch it, never had to deal with it. That allowed all our county city officials to go do their jobs, clean up debris, clean up roads, get power, help get power back, whatever that was. And it was the best, smoothest ever. And what we did, a lot of times with a hurricane, you think about it, if you've ever been to a hurricane, you go to these hurricane sites, you'll drive past lots, not empty lots, but lots. They'll have flat full of water, tarps, MREs, and it just sits there. And they do one food drive line, whatever. Well, I created a network. So all the semis come to me, then we have like 7 box trucks. We send them across the county. And just to, if they didn't have the capacity to forklift or pallet jack or that, we would send it in a box truck and deliver for them. If they had capacity of that, we'd just send them a whole semi. So just networking and doing that throughout the state. So when people say, oh, you don't have government experience, I'm like, well, I went from nothing to managing over 350 million gift in kind. I'm actually on the CRA here. I'm the chair of the CRA here, local municipality. We oversee about $1.7 million budget here, trying to get it back to the people. So I do have the government experience. I just don't have the elected title or whatever.
And I'd like to touch on, I know a lot of your campaign stances, they have to do with housing, they have to do with development, conservation. Um, and even on your website, one of the taglines is Florida is full. What does this all mean to you? How do you balance these things? Obviously we've seen a lot of growth here. A lot of people believe more and more in conserving the Florida that we have left. A lot of people talk about responsible growth. A lot of people talk about different types of housing. Affordable housing is a big buzzword. What does all this mean to you and to your campaign?
Well, we've allowed the last 10 years, we've allowed national developers just come in here and rape and pillage. I mean, they don't care about me or you. They don't care about traffic. They don't care about stress, anxiety. All they care is about the almighty dollar. And they come in and just plow everything down, put them in fast as they can, pull out, and they make their millions of dollars, and they're happy with that. But, the Growth Act in 1985 come in, they had to have everything in place. You had to have a fire, school, and all that had to be in place where you could even do any of that. And 2010 or 11, Rick Scott changed that to where all they needed was a water line, a sewer line, and maybe a turn lane, and that was it. And they just took advantage of it. And we're 15 to 25 years behind on infrastructure. And even to the point right now where our state legislatives have given developers all the power. You're even city and county commissioners, whether they say no to development, a developer's allowed to come and sue them. Well, he's not suing the city or the county, he's suing us. That's our taxpayers' money. And this stuff is still happening. But my message forward is full is this. We don't have the water, obviously infrastructure, but we're at the point now where they're taking our toilet water, sanitation water, treating it, telling you it's okay, and pumping it back in our aquifer and our rivers and saying it's okay. At what point do we become Aaron Brockovich? I truly believe we're there now. I mean, you see sickness and disease on the rise, you got all this stuff. And if it's truly that good, why don't you bottle it yourself and drink it and let me know how that works out for you? But so I use this as a perfect example too. So the Everglades is a perfect example of Florida's full. So we watched lobbyists and big corporations destroy the Everglades. And in doing that, they made hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars doing it. Now we're spending, I think it's 10 billion in restoring it. Well, who's paying for that? Me or you? Taxpayer money. And they act like it's a win-win because we're putting 10 billion in Everglades. Well, now who's making that 10 billion is the next question. Same contractors, I guarantee you, the destroyers are the same contractors making it. And it's the same nonsense that's going on. They're allowing these developers to destroy Florida. People move here for Florida. We are a tourism, huge tourism. The beaches, the waters, the rivers, which are being polluted. All our land, oak trees are being pushed. It used to be nothing but citrus groves and agriculture. We don't have that no more. I want to be Florida sustainable because right now, at the direction we're going with the wrong governor, we're going to be foreign dependent on food, water, everything. They're pushing our cattle out, they're pushing our citrus out, they're pushing agriculture out, and they could care less. They just want a concrete jungle. I want Florida to be sustainable. We got to get ranches going, cattle going, help these guys, get some meat packing processor plants in here, get some kind of citrus going, keep it going. I mean, right now we're spending 187 million every year in citrus research. If we do find that cure in 5 or 10 years, where are we going to put it? If we keep allowing these developers to put everything everywhere.
And so maybe this is kind of a redundant or, maybe it's a question that doesn't need to be asked, but for the record, because it's such a hot topic, I mean, what are your thoughts on things like data centers?
Oh, I'm against them. I mean, Florida's full. I mean, same way with data centers, I mean, there's 4 reasons wrong with data centers. Number one, it's going to destroy our land. There's one in Fort Meade, they want to put 4 million square foot. Number 2, we don't have the water. Number 3, what are we going to do with that polluted water? It's going to go back in our rivers and aquifers. They got to do something with it. I mean, it's like a radiator on your car. You got Freon in it. You got chemicals in it, forever chemicals, and you got to change that somewhere. And you're talking a huge capacity there somewhere. But I'll say there's 5. The fourth biggest reason, back to the Everglades. What's going to happen in 4 years, 5 years when technology changes, and you got a 4 million square foot building center in bunches of them across the state, full of lithium batteries and chips and all this stuff? What is that business going to do? They're going to do what they always do. They're going to pack up and leave it there for the taxpayers to pay for it. So then again, they made millions of dollars doing what they did. Then me and you, the taxpayers, now got to pay to get rid of it. Then where's this going to go? Back in our landfills, back polluting our land, back polluting our waters. But the biggest one is this. They're telling us AI is the future. Well, I don't agree with that. I mean, I understand where to point at AI, but they want AI to do everything. And it's going to put all the small mom and pop businesses out of business. And that's where we're leading to. To me, one of my slogans is not just Florida's full, don't New York my Florida. They want everything, one big monopoly like Amazon running everything, controlling everything, and them have all the power.
I'm glad you brought that up because that's an interesting thing that I think a lot of people are talking about now, where as ubiquitous as AI has becoming, you're looking at a lot of these trade jobs, or you're thinking about things like, maybe agricultural, cattle ranches, things that, you're not going to be able to, type into a computer and have it pop up. Um, I'm interested to hear your thoughts. I know part of, I think what I read on your site, or maybe it was something you had posted, was kind of reevaluating property taxes or homestead taxes. I mean, what are your thoughts on how that should look, and what are your thoughts maybe on like Amendment 3 that's coming up?
Well, the problem with our state, the problem with government is we got lawyers involved, lobbyists, and big corporations. One of my saying is we got to get back to we the people instead of we the lobbyists and we the big corporations. So anytime they draw up a law, they come out with something that sounds awesome from the get-go. It's the solution, but it never ends that way. They start wording it and changing it and all this stuff. So my ultimate goal is no property tax. You know what I'm saying? And I agree. I think we can get there. Number one, I use this as a perfect example. We got Doge running across the state right now, blazing gold. We're doging every city, county, whatever. Jacksonville was 175 million over last year. He showed them, told them. What they did a year later went 300 something million over. So they just showed us no matter how much we tell them and ask them to cut back, they're not going to do it. They're just going to double down because they're scared if you take money away from me. So they double it. So that way, if they take money, at least I'm back where I used to be. So that's what they're trying to do, is that if I don't spend it, if we don't spend it, we don't get it next year. So they're trying to spend more so they keep getting more. So I use this as a perfect example. If you got a 12-year-old spoiled rotten kid who has access to mommy and daddy's credit card, when will they ever quit spending? Never will. You got to pull it away from them. It's the only way they're going to quit. So we have to pull it away from them, make them tighten their belts, make them look at, okay, what do we really need? Because whether people want to believe it or not, we're almost a socialist country now. Everybody wants everything for free. I mean, they expect, your fire to show up within 5 minutes. They expect an ambulance to be there in 5 minutes. They expect everything right now, and everything they want is free. And it's a huge cost. It's right now it's a cost of your home. And the greatest asset you have, the greatest generational wealth you have is your home. And some people are inheriting homes and they can't even stay there because they can't afford a property tax on it. So they're losing a generational, maybe 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 generations of housing coming to them, and they can't even afford it. They're forced to sell it because of property tax. So I think it's like everything else. You buy something, you should own it. Why the greatest asset they can take away from you?
And maybe building on top of that, because that's an interesting point because you got taxes, of course, you've got things like insurance, which I'm sure you've got thoughts on. You've got the general cost of homes themselves in Florida, and I don't know, maybe some of this has to do with second homes or institutional buying. I mean, I'm interested to hear your thoughts. I think part of it was, I think you had mentioned something about tiny home communities or ADUs. There was something, maybe correct me if I'm wrong. I think a lot of people, they talk about affordable housing. Hey, how can we make it so that essentially, I guess the goal is really the younger generation. How are they going to be able to work their way into home ownership?
Well, the biggest thing is I make a lot of younger generational mad because we've always been unaffordable. You know what I'm saying? Even when I was a kid growing up, I had to work 2 or 3 jobs, or I worked one business 16, 20 hours a day, 7 days a week to get ahead. You know what I'm saying? I think they've been sold a false reality of you go to college, you get a college degree, you get out, you're making 6 figures, you get the family, the house, and everything. And I grew up in the 80s, and obviously I was born in 77, but 80s and 90s, that vision and goals wasn't there for me. You know what I'm saying? It was,
It's true. Yeah.
I mean, they don't look at everything's relevant. You know what I'm saying? The difference is a dollar changes and different thing changes. But even though housing was cheaper, pay was cheaper. You know what I'm saying? When I first started, you was making $7, $8 an hour. When I remember the day when I was making 15, I was probably in my 20s making $15 an hour, and I thought I had it whooped. You know what I'm saying? Now $15 an hour, you got to make that ain't nothing. So it's relevant. You know what I'm saying? It's the cost and prices. Now, there is some false real estate markets right now because of BlackRock, Blackstone, these people coming in here buying these developments, running prices up. I know Trump's working on some stuff. DeSantis is working on stuff where they can't do that anymore. So there are some of that's happening right now, and you're fixing to see a huge shift and change. Plus COVID, you know, um, part of I feel our governor and representatives done wrong was, hey, Florida's a free state. Y'all come. They just opened the border. Hey, just come here, and it just flooded people, which floods the market. But again, it's back to lobbyists and big corporations are running the state, and that just showed you it allowed these developers to make tons and tons of money, coming in and doing stuff. And there's things that got to change like that. We got to get lobbyists and big corporations out of Tallahassee. To me, one way is get PACs out of it. We got to quit allowing these seats to be bought in. They get voted in. People are buying influence, buying their way into governor seats or whoever seats, that kind of stuff. But even in affordability, you think of insurance is a huge. You got property tax, insurance, electric bill, your water bill, all that stuff is lobbyists taking advantages of the people. Because the governor appoints your insurance commission, your utility commission, all these water boards, all this he appoints, and every time they want to get a rate increase, they never get told no. Why? Because they're big donors to their PACs or big donors to their governor's race or whoever that is. And you need a governor that's going to be in there, that's going to fight for the people, to replace all them boards and get no people to where, hey, no, show me why, you need to make an extra $100 million this year. Tico's a perfect example. I live in Polk County. 23, 24, they made $300 million net profit. They went to the state and said, hey, we need a rate increase. 24, 25, they made $400 million, extra $100 million off me or you. How's that right?
Yeah, that's interesting too, because I know, I mean, you're right. There's been a lot of people. I mean, going back to the first thing you had mentioned, were people coming from, let's say, the Northeast. We had people moving, I think even from like California and Texas and all these other states that we didn't usually really see, even the
Right.
Midwest. I guess there's different areas that they get more people from the Midwest, but I'm interested to hear from your point of view. How do you balance things like, let's say someone wanted to move here from New York, let's say somebody wanted to move here from New Jersey, probably a typical story. How do you balance things like tourism? I'm sure there's a lot of people that come down here every winter, maybe. How do you balance that with, maybe there's a tax, or they pay property taxes, or there's some sort of tourism tax? How do you balance
Yeah.
that with development, especially with things like, agricultural land? I don't want to be too long winded here, but I know a lot of agricultural land, people who own it, they've been forced, or they feel pressured to sell for a lot of these developments that you initially spoke on.
Well, to stop that is me. You stop rezoning. No more rezoning. What Florida is zoned is zoned. So when your land zone Ag 5, Ag 10, Ag 2.5, whatever zone is done, they can't come in here and rezone. That's how they're getting away with it. So that drops your prices, drops people from being forced to sell. Then, with tourism and that's where we make most of our money and most of our taxes. But I feel like if you're moving in the state, I don't know if it's constitutional or not, but what I'd like to do, if you move to this state, almost you can't vote for 4, 5, 6 years or something. You know what I'm saying? Because they bring their ways and their values down here. Y'all ruined New York City. Y'all ruined California by the way you vote. Then you come down here and you don't change nothing. You just want our great ways and our values and what we built, but then you want to slowly change it. You want it your way. Well, I don't, the Karens or whatever, then you start complaining. But, I don't know if that's constitutional or not, but I'd like to see that. But in the same way, you don't get the free property tax for the first 4 or 5 years and you move out of state here. You know what I'm saying? You don't get that benefit of us who's lived here and done that. It's some way you work it into there, and you have to live so many years and do it. There's plenty of ways though. Really, to me, if you look at the waste, fraud, abuse, the backdoor deals, that we know that are happening, it's probably in the hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars that we could save, that we could take care of property tax.
Well, I know, part of what you had on your website and part of your stance was trade schools that had to do with standardized testing. What are your thoughts for how we optimize education for the younger generation?
Yeah, we got to get over testing out of schools. That's one of the biggest things right now. And we got to get life skills back in school. We got to allow teachers to teach. We got to get discipline back in schools. But number one, obviously, we got to get God back in schools. Moral character. Our everything, moral compass. We got to get all that back in school. But the biggest thing is, when they get older, we got to get trades back in schools. So what I'd like to see ninth grade, every male and female, because we have only male and female, we have to allow them to do a trade. So ninth grade, every person takes the trades of AC, electric, plumbing, sewing, home ec, all that, and they learn everything you need to know in life. Then their 10th, 11th, 12th grade, they can perfect that. Say, hey, I want to be electrician. Well, by the time they graduate high school, they have everything they need. They're just not going into a job as an apprentice, minimum wage, minimum pay. They're actually going in with decent pay, skill set, already know how to work, or even start a business. You know what I'm saying? So a lot of these kids have no idea. What do I do? An LLC? Do I S corp? Do I do a C corp? What do I do? Do I do a handyman license? What kind of license do I got to have? All that stuff, they can learn in high school. Because to me, even when I went to high school in the 90s, 10th, 11th, 12th grade was a waste of my time. You know what I'm saying? It was just a bunch of electives and
Yeah.
maybe an English. I had to learn Shakespeare, which I hated.
That's really funny because I think you're right. And I remember when I graduated from college, you have to deal with things, different government agencies, or you got to pay an unemployment tax, and you got to file at Sunbiz, and you're going like, hold up, I had to take basket weaving elective, but
Yeah.
this is something that I don't know. So that's an interesting topic, and I before we finish up, because I want to make sure we touch on some of the stuff that you had brought up originally with disaster relief. I know you have a lot of experience with stuff like that, and that's always top of mind to people in
Yeah.
Florida. Do you want to talk a little bit about what that looks like to you? I mean, how you can be swift and strategic, as I think you would put it, and how you make sure that resources are getting to the right place. Because as we had talked about before, I mean, it's easy for waste to be found in
Yeah.
some of these municipal or government agencies.
Well, our own governor said this a while back. He says most people don't even know who the governor is till a hurricane hits. You know what I'm saying? So we need somebody that's hurricane ready, disaster proven. And I did that since 2016. But even our own government now, like I said, a lot of this stuff sits on empty lots. They don't have the partnership. They don't understand the logistics. We need somebody who can, I do all this on a staff of 2.5. Right now, really, I'm running like 5 jobs, 5 different businesses and jobs from running governor, BW Communications, Freedom Tour, Freedom Church. And I'll say the fifth one's obviously honeydews at home, right? It's always busy, but we need somebody who's willing to do that, know that. So to me, over the last 6 years, COVID to hurricanes, I built partnerships across the state. I know who's out there doing the work. I know who's willing to do the work. Get it in the right hands, cut out the red tape, quit allowing this stuff just to sit in empty parking lots. I mean, perfect example is it was last year after Milton, I won't tell all tales, but a government agency called me and they had 3 semi-loads of sleeping bags and pillows. Nice kit had sheets, pillows, sleeping bag, all in one kit. 3 semi-loads just sat outside of Tropicana Stadium, just sat there. It'd been out in the rain, sat there, and they were going to throw them all in a dumpster. And they were all prepackaged, done. Some of them had a little mold on it, but man, we could wash all that stuff. You know what I'm saying? You know how many families need this? It's just the waste, and it's they don't know how to manage it and handle it. All they know how to do is unfortunately, you got, I call them third party vendors, outside vendors. When a hurricane hits, they want to, spend as much as they can. Government spend as much that way they make
Right.
money. They don't care if it sits on the ground. They're getting paid for that. And that's just unfortunately the system we're in today. Nobody's overseeing it. And it's fine. I don't mind you, which I don't want to, but if that's something we had to do or something that happened, At least let's get it to people's hands where it can be utilized. Get it to the homeless, get it to the less fortunate, get it to ministries who can hand it out, not sit it there and throw it in a dumpster. I mean, it's just insane the stuff that happens. I mean, a perfect example before Hurricane Milton and Helene come through there. Um, State of Florida finally reached out to me. They reached out to partners all across the state, and nobody would take it. They had almost 100 semi-loads of water, 100 semi-loads of MREs they needed to get rid of. They were moving warehouses. Some of it was out of date, and I ended up having to move it for the whole state of Florida. I just shipped it to different partners across the state. But same thing. They don't know. Nobody has a logistic awareness partnerships across Florida or the willingness to do it. So like everybody thinks of Feeding America, right? Feeding America's got all these big things. They didn't want it. We don't have the
Mhm.
warehouse space. We're not going to take it. And so they're Florida throw their hands up. They're like, we don't have nobody that'll take this. But I was willing to do that and a ability to do that. And I don't mind. I mean, we work sometimes 7 days a week, 16, 20 hours a day. If free water's there, free MREs are there, and we can feed people and help people and get it in hands, I'm going to work as hard as I can to get that done. And I continue to do that. But these other places, like, we're good. We got plenty of money. Our warehouses are full. We're not going to, they don't have the heart for Florida.
And maybe tagging on to that, because I know insurance is something that maybe we had mentioned, but I know that's all obviously something people think about when it comes to storms. How do you optimize as well something like that? I think you had mentioned. I don't know if it was Milton or if it was might have been Helene. There was one where I remember particularly could have been both, but there were a lot of issues with people. Even just getting a claim paid, getting some sort of acknowledgement. I mean, is there anything that you would do to address the insurance industry, not just in the insurance itself, but how it relates to home
100%.
affordability in general?
Well, two things, with insurance is a huge one. So there's a lot of things we can do. Number one is the governor appoints the boards. We got to get boards in there who's going to fight for the people. Number two, we got to quit giving all the power to the insurance companies. How is it I can pay insurance for 10, 20, 30 years, then all of a sudden I want to claim and I have to fight for it. I have to go get a lawyer for it. I want to make it mandated. If a storm comes, something comes, you got to pay these guys within such a period of time. We got to mandate that. It's got to be forced. Like I said, it ain't no longer we the people, it's we the lobbyists and we the big corporations that are running the state. They win. A perfect example, you can pay for 20, 30 years and all of a sudden a hurricane comes and you might not get nothing because, there's a clause, there's something,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it happens time and time again. So I'd like to see it, a couple things. I'd like to see some way we can self-insure ourselves. So who's forcing us to get insurance? Well, it's the finance companies, right? When you go get a mortgage, they're forcing you to get insurance. So make these mortgage companies, you know what? You're going to force me, then we're going to as state of Florida, we're going to force you, to get an insurance rate, get the cheapest rate, get something, force you to do it, or even force you to give me an equity line of credit because I'd like to even self-insure, make myself have a savings account I have to build. It's my money. Then I can use it if a storm hits or something hits. But then also make these finance companies give me up to like a 50,000 equity line of credit. So that way, if a storm does hit, I got immediate access to 50 grand. Boom, I can come in here and fix my house like that. I don't have to wait on insurance. And I'm paying for it because it's a loan. It ain't nothing free. So to me, it's gonna get rid of the waste fraud because people ain't gonna want to pay. You got to pay for it. It ain't free money, and it ain't like you're doing a claim. I mean, obviously you're doing a claim, but it's financed money, and I think it would get a lot of fraud out of there and do that. So to us, we have to force the hand of these financial companies, to make it to where no, this is what Floridians deserve. We're tired of getting raped and pillaged by insurance companies.
That's a really interesting point. And I was thinking a little bit about the hurricanes. Obviously, you're from Polk County. That's kind of an interesting spot because you guys are kind of sandwiched between that Tampa Orlando metro area, right? For the most part.
Yes, sir.
So, I guess one of the things I'd be interested to hear from you. Like, what does Florida look like to you 10 years, 20 years down the line?
Well, it really depends on what governor we get. If I get governor, it's going to look like it is today. You know what I'm saying? Keep it old Florida, keep the ranchers going, keep the cattle going, keep citrus going, sustainability. If the other governor gets in here, other people getting here, unfortunately, it's going to be New York City. I mean, that's their, unfortunately, idea, and that's their message. Some of these guys, they want Florida to be the financial capital. They want the AI data centers. They want all this stuff, but the people of Florida don't. You know what I'm saying? We want to keep it the way it is. We want to stay the tourism, state of the nation. People want to come here, keep the tourism, keep the beaches, keep the waters, keep access to all of it. And I want to access more hunting land and outdoors where we can, as Floridians, have a place to go ride UTVs, ATVs without lawsuits, get lawyers out of it. You get hurt, it's your own deal. Quit suing everybody, which causes a lot of this stuff. We got to get lawyers. Lawyers are horrible, and we got to get lawyers out of all this sue happy stuff. You know what I'm saying? I want to restrict a lot of lawyers on a lot of stuff to where they're not getting they're getting a very small piece of every pie, and the individuals getting, which will make them quit doing lawsuits. But we got to get it to where back to we the people, but I want to see more outdoors available to the people of Florida. I want to see our waters and fisheries cleaned up and clear, the spraying gone, and just more access to Florida.
I appreciate that, Mr. Williams. I guess, before we wrap up, is there anything that you think we didn't touch on that is important? I know we kind of had that connection issue, so we're
Right.
playing catch up
Well,
on some of the other things. But if there's anything that's top of mind,
I want
please
to
let me know.
make voter fraud treason on our country. 20 years prison minimum to death penalty. You know what I'm saying? We got to get accountability. And like I said, we got to get back to we the people instead of we the lobbyists and we the big corporations, and we got to get back to one nation under God. We got to get God back in everything. It's the only thing that's going to fix it all.
Well, I appreciate those. Well, actually, before we wrap up, why don't you tell people where they can find you? I know you got your website, social media. You've, I'm sure, got speaking engagements going on the next week or
Actually, we're in
so.
Lakeland tonight. Tomorrow, heck, I'm so busy. I think we're in Homosassa, but you can go to our website, www.bobbywilliamsforfloridagovernor.com or www.bwflgov.com.
Well, I appreciate it, Mr. Williams. I appreciate you being on. It was great to talk with you, and we will tag all your profiles and stuff wherever we post it as well. So
That's a wrap for this episode of The Current by TreasureCoast.com. If you enjoyed the conversation, be sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. You can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. Follow us on social media or visit TreasureCoast.com for local events, tips, and news. Have a guest or topic you'd love to hear on the show? Let us know at TreasureCoast.com. Until next time, keep riding the current and enjoying everything the Treasure Coast has to offer. See you soon.